The Lost Wanderer. The first thing Ethan Carter noticed was the silence. His ship had gone down hard, tearing through the dense jungle canopy before slamming into the earth in a violent, metal-crunching halt. The emergency ejection system had deployed at the last second, throwing him free before the craft exploded in a blinding flash of blue fire. Now, as he sat up amid the alien foliage, taking stock of his injuries, he realized he had no idea where he was. The planet wasn't on any star charts. His mission had been a routine survey of a nearby asteroid belt, but a sudden energy surge had knocked out his systems, dragging him off course. Now, his vessel was a smoldering wreck a few hundred yards away, and his only companion was the eerie hush of the jungle around him. Ethan stood, wincing as he tested his limbs. A few bruises, a gash on his arm, but nothing critical. His survival pack had landed nearby, still intact. Checking his sidearm, he exhaled in relief. It had power, but limited ammo. He had to be careful. The jungle was unlike anything he had ever seen. Towering trees with violet leaves stretched toward the sky, their thick trunks glowing faintly as if pulsing with life. Strange, bioluminescent vines slithered like living things, and the air smelled sweet, almost intoxicating. Everything about this world felt alive and watchful. Then he heard it, a rustle, a shadow shifting between the trees. He wasn't alone. Ethan froze, gripping his weapon. Something, or someone, was observing him. He turned slowly, eyes scanning the underbrush. And then they emerged. Women, tall beyond belief, at least 12 feet in height, their bodies sculpted like ancient goddesses. Their skin shimmered in shades of blue and violet, hair cascading down their backs like rivers of gold and silver. They wore garments woven from what looked like living silk, flowing like water with every movement. They carried no weapons, but their sheer size and the way they moved, silent, controlled, powerful, made it clear they didn't need them. Ethan took an involuntary step back, pulse hammering. One of them stepped forward, her golden eyes locked onto his. She was striking, even by human standards. High cheekbones, full lips, an athletic form that radiated strength and grace. She spoke, her voice low and melodic, but the language was completely alien to him. "I don't understand," Ethan said cautiously, lowering his weapon. "I mean no harm." The woman tilted her head, studying him like a puzzle she was trying to solve. Then, slowly, she reached out. Ethan hesitated, but didn't flinch as she placed a massive hand on his chest. Her palm was warm, her touch surprisingly gentle. Another woman, this one with deep violet skin and silver hair, murmured something. The first woman, clearly the leader, nodded. She gestured for Ethan to follow. Considering his options, alone in an unknown jungle with limited supplies or walking with a group of towering, mysterious women, he made the only logical choice. He followed them. They led him through the dense foliage, moving effortlessly despite their size. After nearly an hour, the trees parted, revealing a sight that stole Ethan's breath. A city, but not a city of metal and glass. This was something else entirely. Massive structures, seemingly grown rather than built, rose from the earth like colossal trees woven together by nature itself. Bridges of glowing vines connected platforms, and luminous waterfalls cascaded into pools that reflected the twin moons above. Hundreds of the giant women moved through the city, their elegant forms flowing with an otherworldly grace. And not a single man in sight. Ethan swallowed hard. As they entered the heart of the settlement, a grand hall carved from what looked like living stone stood before them. Inside, seated on a throne of woven light, was another woman, taller than the rest, her presence commanding. Her violet eyes bore into Ethan's soul, assessing him in a way that made him feel utterly exposed. The golden-haired woman who had first touched him spoke, addressing the ruler. The words were foreign, but the meaning became clear when the leader, the queen, rose and stepped toward him. "You," she said in heavily accented but understandable English. "You are the one the prophecy spoke of." Ethan stiffened. "Prophecy?" She nodded. "You are the small one, The last hope of the Ny'Thari. The what? Ethan's mind raced. Our people. The queen's expression was unreadable, but there was something beneath her composed exterior. Something desperate. We are the Ny'Thari, and we are dying. Ethan's mouth went dry. He had crash-landed on a planet of beautiful, towering women, and they were looking at him like he was the answer to their survival. Something told him his life was about to change forever. A tempting proposal. Ethan sat in stunned silence. The words of the Ny'Thari queen, Zarana, echoed in his mind. You are the last hope of our people. He had expected many things when he crash-landed. Hostile creatures, starvation, even death, but not this. Not a society of towering, beautiful women claiming he was part of some prophecy. Hold on, he said, raising a hand. You're telling me I'm supposed to save your people? How exactly? Zarana's gaze was unwavering. By giving us children. Ethan coughed, nearly choking on his own breath. I what? The hall was silent. Around him, dozens of Ny'Thari women observed his reaction with interest. Some hopeful, some curious, and a few eager. Zarana continued, her voice calm but resolute. For centuries, we have been without males of our kind. A sickness took them from us long ago, leaving only the women. Our ancestors believed our species would wither and die, but the oracle foretold that a traveler would come, one unlike us, but compatible. Ethan rubbed his temples. Let me guess. I'm that traveler. Valara, the golden-haired warrior who had first found him, stepped forward. We have studied you, Ethan Carter. Your kind's genetics are close to ours, close enough that reproduction may be possible. If you agree, you could save generations of Ny'Thari. Ethan exhaled slowly. The weight of their words settled on him like a mountain. They wanted him to father their children. It wasn't a demand, but it was clear that his decision carried immense consequences. He looked around, scanning their faces. These women, these giants, were not primitive. Their city was advanced, their culture rich. But there was sorrow beneath the beauty, a quiet desperation. They weren't just asking him for help. They were begging. Ethan cleared his throat. This is a lot to take in. Zarana inclined her head. We understand. You may take time to consider. That was at least something. He wasn't a prisoner. He had a choice. Over the next few days, Ethan was given free rein to explore the city. Everywhere he went, he felt the weight of expectation. Ny'Thari women watched him with open curiosity, some whispering as he passed. He learned more about their way of life. The Ny'Thari possessed advanced biotechnology, shaping their homes from living materials and cultivating crops through symbiotic plant systems. Their bodies, though massive, moved with effortless grace. They were warriors, healers, and scholars, but without men, their civilization was slowly fading. He spent time with Ny'Thari, a gentle healer who explained the Ny'Thari's declining birth rates. We can extend life, but we cannot create it without a father. She touched his hand, her voice full of quiet hope. You could change everything. Then there was Shalira, a mischievous hunter who seemed to enjoy flustering him. You must have many mates back home, she teased, grinning. You are small, but you are strong. Ethan rolled his eyes. Where I come from, size doesn't determine everything. Shalira smirked. I would like to test that. Ethan quickly excused himself, but it was Valara who occupied his thoughts the most. The warrior had been his first contact, and unlike the others, she didn't push him for an answer. Instead, she trained him, teaching him how to navigate the jungle, how to wield the Ny'Thari's energy-based weaponry. They sparred, they talked, and though she tried to remain distant, Ethan could see it. She wanted him to stay. One evening, as they sat by a glowing river, Valara finally spoke. You are afraid. Ethan sighed. I wouldn't say afraid, just unsure. She studied him with those piercing golden eyes. I did not envy your choice. But I know this. No matter what you decide, you will not be abandoned. You are one of us now. Something in his chest tightened. He had been alone for so long, moving from one mission to the next, never truly belonging anywhere. But here, on this alien world, among these giant women who needed him, he felt something stir, a sense of purpose. But before he could respond, a distant horn sounded through the city. A warning. Valara's expression darkened. Scouts have returned. There is trouble. Ethan stood. What kind of trouble? She turned to him, jaw clenched. The Drakshar know you are here, and they are coming. Battle and choice. The horn's call echoed through the Ny'Thari city, its deep, haunting tone sending a ripple of tension through the air. Ethan followed Valara as she sprinted toward the main gates, her long strides easily outpacing him. By the time he arrived, dozens of warriors were already assembled, their glowing weapons drawn, their expressions grim. Beyond the gates, in the darkened jungle, shadows moved. Then they stepped into the moonlight. The Drakshar. Ethan's breath caught. They were giants like the Ny'Thari, but where the Ny'Thari had an ethereal, elegant beauty, the Drakshar were built for war. Their skin was darker, their features sharper, their armor heavier. They carried crude but deadly weapons. Massive axes, spears tipped with black metal that pulsed with energy. At the front of their force stood their leader, Xeraxia. She was taller than Valara, her crimson hair falling in thick braids over her shoulders. Her piercing, reptilian eyes locked onto Ethan immediately. "So," she said, her voice a purr of amusement. "It is true. The small one exists." Ethan swallowed. He had the distinct feeling he was being appraised like a prize animal. Zorana stepped forward, her expression unreadable. "State your purpose, Xeraxia." Xeraxia smirked. "You already know it." She gestured to Ethan. "The male belongs to us." A low murmur spread through the Ny'Thari ranks, but Zorana remained calm. "He is not yours to claim." Xeraxia's expression hardened. "You hoard him for yourselves? Selfish. There are others who have need of him. Our people deserve his seed just as much as yours." Ethan tensed. This was getting worse by the second. Valara stepped forward, her voice sharp. "He is not property to be passed between tribes." Xeraxia laughed. "He is a resource, and resources must be shared." She turned to Ethan, her eyes gleaming. "Come willingly, human, and I will ensure you are treated well." Ethan squared his shoulders. "Yeah, I'm going to have to pass on that." Xeraxia's smirk faded. "A shame." She turned back to Zorana. "Last chance. Give him to us, or we take him." Zorana did not hesitate. "Then we fight." The battle erupted in an instant. The Drakshar warriors charged, their sheer size and power shaking the ground. The Ny'Thari met them head-on, their glowing weapons clashing against brutal axes and spears. Ethan ducked as a spear nearly took his head off. He wasn't just going to stand there. He needed to fight. Valara tossed him a Ny'Thari energy bow. "Aim for their knees. Slow them down." Ethan took position on a ledge, drawing the weapon. It was surprisingly intuitive, responding to his touch with a hum of energy. He fired. The shot struck a Drakshar warrior's knee, sending him crashing down. Valara fought like a storm, her massive blade cutting through the enemy with deadly precision. But she was outnumbered. Ethan saw Xeraxia closing in on her, a cruel smile on her lips. Ethan's instincts kicked in. He grabbed a discarded spear, sprinting toward them. As Xeraxia raised her weapon to strike Valara down, Ethan lunged, driving the spear into her shoulder. Xeraxia roared in pain, spinning to face him. "You dare!" Ethan barely dodged her counterattack, but it bought Valara enough time to recover. She slammed her fist into Xeraxia's gut, sending the warlord sprawling. The Drakshar, seeing their leader wounded, hesitated. Zorana seized the moment, raising her staff. Enough! The battlefield fell silent. The Drakshar warriors waited, their eyes flicking to Xeraxia. The warlord groaned, clutching her wound. She glared at Ethan before spitting onto the ground. "This isn't over." She turned to her forces. "Fall back." Just like that, the Drakshar retreated, vanishing into the jungle. The Ny'Thari warriors let out a collective exhale. The battle was over, for now. Later that night, the city was quiet. Ethan sat by a fire, tending to his bruises. Valara sat beside him, silent. Finally, she spoke. "You saved my life." Ethan shrugged. "You saved mine first." She turned to him, her golden eyes intense. "You are more than just a resource to us, Ethan. You are one of us now." Ethan met her gaze. In that moment, he knew his choice had already been made. A future forged in love. The fires of battle had long since died down, but the echoes of the conflict lingered in the air. The Ny'Thari had driven back the Drakshar, but everyone knew they would return. Ethan sat on a stone ledge, overlooking the glowing rivers that wound through the city. His body ached from the fight, but his mind was far more restless. He had a decision to make. "You are troubled." Valara's voice was quiet, yet it cut through the night like a blade. Ethan glanced at her as she approached, her tall, powerful form silhouetted against the twin moons. Despite the battle earlier, she moved with effortless grace, but Ethan could see the exhaustion in her eyes. "Just thinking," he admitted. She sat beside him, the difference in their sizes as stark as ever. "Of leaving," Ethan exhaled slowly. "That's just it. I don't know if I want to leave." Valara's expression remained unreadable, but something flickered in her gaze. "You came from the stars, Ethan. If there's a way to return, we would not stop you." "But what if I don't have anything to return to?" he said before he could stop himself. "Back home, I was just another explorer moving from one mission to the next. No roots, no purpose." He looked up at her. "Here, I matter." Valara was silent for a moment. Then she said, "You mattered before. You simply did not see it." Her words struck deeper than Ethan expected. He rubbed the back of his neck, glancing at her. "And what about you? What do you want?" Valara hesitated, which was rare for her. "I want my people to survive," she said at last. "But more than that, I want to know you did not choose us out of duty, but because you want to be here." Ethan studied her. For all her warrior strength, she was vulnerable in this moment. She wasn't asking for an obligation. She was asking for something real. Ethan reached out, placing his smaller hand over hers. "Then let me make this clear," he said. "I want to be here, with you." A slow, rare smile crossed Valara's lips. The next day, Ethan stood before the Ny'Thari Council, Zorana watching him with quiet expectation. "I've made my decision," Ethan said, his voice steady. He looked out at the gathered Ny'Thari, at the women who had taken him in, who had fought beside him, who had placed their hopes on him. "I'm staying." A ripple of relief passed through the crowd. Zorana nodded, as if she had already known his answer. "Then you will not just be a guest, but one of us. You will have a home here, Ethan Carter." The ceremony that followed was simple but meaningful. The Ny'Thari did not see him as an outsider anymore. He was part of them. And that night, as Ethan sat beneath the stars with Valara, her hand resting over his, he knew he had not just found a new home. He had chosen it. A future had been forged, not just for the Ny'Thari, but for him.